Hello, it's Kit Allowitz with another Leadership Journey video segment. Today I want to talk about something a bit peculiar. I want to ask you a question that you probably haven't had to think about or don't want to think about, and yet it's probably a question that most of us have either been victims of or recipients of in our professional careers already. What I'm going to talk about is the dichotomy between either being a wise leader or a wise manager, but not getting both. So here's the question that I want to tease you with for a handful of minutes in this video. Which would you prefer? A manager who can't lead or a leader who can't manage? Said slightly more eloquently, would you prefer to be managed by someone who doesn't know how to lead or led by someone who doesn't know how to manage? Now, this question comes from Henry Mitzberg, longtime professor at the McGill University in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I'd like to give you the answer right out of the chutes here in case you can't fathom putting your heads around having to listen to me trying to unpack this particular conundrum. The answer is this. It's option number one. The first one. If faced with the choice, you and I are better off to be managed by someone who doesn't lead but can manage. Now, if you agree, keep listening because I'd like to give you a few more things to consider in order to strengthen your position. If, on the other hand, you don't agree, I'd also invite you to continue listening such that I might give you a few more things to chew on. And if in the end you still don't agree with me, that's okay too. Now, I actually love the manager who can't lead or leader who can't manage question, which has likely been around forever. However, I hadn't been exposed to it or thought of it in this particular order of wording before my introduction to Dr. Matthew Trzaskowski. Now, I've also heard Matt say another fascinating thinker statement. Try this on for size. No company has the luxury of having leaders who do not manage, but no company also should not tolerate managers who do not lead. How's that for a thinker statement? Now, you and I have been on the leadership journey now for 3 years, and during that time, we've weighted our explorations more heavily on the leadership side, emphasizing much more time and attention to the value of being on this journey of self-discovery, as well as this idea that leader is not the same as leadership. This journey of self-discovery has certainly yielded the notion, additionally, that human relations is not you dealing with others. It's, in fact, you dealing with yourself dealing with others. With that said, it's the leadership journey's committee's intention to begin over the next 6 months a deeper dive into the world of manager and its significant contribution as well to the 3 I's, as well as building a high-performing culture, as well as this idea of institutionalization, as well as this idea of being a learning organization. Now, my own leadership journey began some 30 years ago in the age of Dr. Stephen R. Covey that I worked for, where he carefully described, outlined, and defined what is the difference between a manager and a leader. I have for many years used this statement when explaining it myself that I learned in my Covey days to describe what is management versus leadership. And it is this: you lead people, you manage things. Does that sound right? Covey also stated that management is efficiency in climbing the ladder of success, whereas leadership, on the other hand, determines that the ladder is actually leaning against the right wall. And I kind of like that analogy. I also learned many years ago this idea that there are 2 classic management mistakes. Do you know what those are? Try these 2 on for size. Classic management mistake number 1 is the belief that you can manage others before you've learned to manage yourself. Classic management mistake number 2 is the belief that you can manage others instead of letting others manage themselves against a shared set of expectations. How does that sound? And try that one on for size. How do you get your head around that in terms of these 2 classic management mistakes, and how do you differentiate between what is leadership versus management, and where do you draw the line? So I want to explore those 2 just for a handful of minutes and tease them. For today, we really just want to mess with this idea that what if the leadership management gods of the universe came to you and said, hey, you can only choose one, either being a manager, having a manager who can't lead, or a leader who can't manage. What's your choice? And what if, by the way, they said, the universe god said, hey, and you only have 39 seconds to decide. What would you do? For me, I would probably start biting my nails as I quickly decide which choice has, in fact, broader and more far-reaching ramifications for me in my work life. And I am a leadership reader junkie. And so I'm actually heavily biased that leaders play a vital role for the enterprise. For perhaps, as the phrase goes, the leader ensures the ladder is leaning against the right wall. And that's probably true. If I'm, in fact, going to be climbing some wall, it would be nice to know it's leaning up against the right wall so that I don't have to descend the ladder later on. On the other hand, I also consider myself to be an over-efficient, overzealous. I live by my to-do list, my tasks, and I look for every single opportunity to squeeze more out of the day, the month, the machine, my life. Wouldn't then, in fact, a manager who can't lead, if I had to choose, but can manage, help me achieve my particular way of being and my objectives? Maybe so. So we go back to the question, would you prefer to be managed by someone who doesn't know how to lead or led by someone who does not know how to manage? As stated earlier, if forced to decide between the two, I submit to you that you would want to be managed by someone who doesn't know how to lead but does know how to manage. As employees, we in fact spend our days in planning, organizing, controlling, executing job descriptions, and desired outcomes. A manager fits nicely with that. Their responsibility is specifically to own planning, organizing, directing, coordinating, controlling outcomes for the company. What we do and what managers do day in and day out seems to nicely align each other very nicely. We want it and the manager wants it. On the other hand, a leader drives principle, drives mutual influence, and moves purpose. Also important items that we also want to be part of and love being around as employees. Both desirable, and yet in the end, we know from our leadership journey experience that a productive worker is a happy worker and not necessarily the other way around. Thus supporting the idea that if a manager is about productivity, a manager might help us be more happy. So, for this teaser exercise and video, the manager wins out over the leader, even if it's just so slightly in this argument. And I don't even know how much for sure, how much they win out by. It's perhaps like the axiom that states, intent counts more than technique. Now try that one on for size. Is that true or false? Intent counts more than technique. I submit to you that also is true. With that said, both items are important. Intent and technique are both important. And yet, if you have all the intent in the world, but have no technique, you might never sell anything to anyone if you are a salesperson. If, on the other hand, you have all the technique in the world, but lack intent, you might likely find yourself not trusted by customers who want to buy, but don't. Both are important. In the end, intent counts more than technique. Same thing here in leadership versus management. In the end, perhaps management counts more than technique. Both are important. Both are vital to the cocktail for a world-class, wise leader manager. Yet for the provocative nature of this video, it is wiser to be attuned to management skills first than leadership. So let me give a couple comparisons. Managers do the right things. Leaders do things right. Managers surrender the context. Leaders conquer the context. Managers adopt the truth from others and implement it without probing the facts, whereas a leader produces vision, concepts, plans, and programs. Managers are concerned with efficiency. Leaders are concerned with effectiveness. Managers ask why. Leaders ask why and what. Managers are concerned with controls, procedures, policies, and structures. Leaders are concerned with trust and people. Managers copy and manage the status quo. Leaders innovate and initiate. Managers opt for push rather than pull. Leaders opt for pull versus push. And finally, managers look at the bottom line. Leaders look into or out to the horizon. So my powerful emotional close for this video is this. The good news, as you already know, is that you and I can be both. We can be both a wise leader and a wise manager at the same time, just like you can have both intent and technique at the same time. We've learned over the past 3 years that leadership has a specific definition, and it is the mutual influence between leaders and collaborators who intend real change that reflects their mutual purposes. So my invitation to you is this. This week, debate with your learning partner or buddy the statement. Would you prefer to be managed by someone who doesn't know how to lead or led by someone who doesn't know how to manage? Decide what you think. Then take time to look at the way that you see things. For when you take time to look at the way you see things, the way that you see things and the world can change. I'm Kit Alowitz, and we'll see you next time.